When you first discover the love of literature and start reading seriously, there's a feeling just like the world is blooming. Some distant and unimaginably immense thing is opening to you its petals, revealing itself by degrees, pressing itself directly upon every one of your raw nerve endings, and breathing fiery, significance-laden life into every one of your senses. As a teenager at school, I hadn't been very much interested in my English literature classes. To me, they were yet another part of what seemed an odious obligation. I felt detained and inconvenienced by the grey world of the miserable comprehensive school I attended in London, and all I wanted to do was to escape, to exist in a world of colour and significance. I was encouraged to read as a young person, and I read a lot, mostly pulpy science fiction, for which I still have a lot of affection, but I gradually grew more interested in more ambitious forms of literature, and at the age of 18 I started working in a bookshop. The people I met there opened up a world that had been there all the time, but which I hadn't yet learned to see. For the next few years I devoured absolutely everything I could, ploughed through countless books in a single furlong. I fell in love with the work of Hugh and became enamoured with such writers as I was reading at the time, many of which are still firm favourites today, such as Herman Melville, Mary Shelley, Jean Rhys, Georg Büchner, James Joyce. And with these writers came that feeling of expansion, like wandering through a vast and endlessly expanding garden of light, in which each new discovery is a revelation. The flowers unfurl, promising to release their perfume for eternity. I'm reminded of the famous poem by William Wordsworth, written in 1802, that addresses this continuity of wonderment. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. For Wordsworth, life itself seems to be contingent upon the ability to respond to the world's gestures, to feel innately moved by a childish wonderment in nature, and perpetually enriched by the power of aesthetic and spiritual experience, to be able to see a rainbow as if for the first time, every time. The rainbow casts its arc across an entire human life, encompassing past, present, and future. Wordsworth, mathematician that he was, even inserts a little pun for us, just to deepen the motif of circularity and infinity. But what if literature can't always live up to this demand? By my mid-20s, I'd read even more. I'd studied for 4 years at university, and my reading interests had expanded to include poetry, philosophy, and literary criticism. But at a certain point, it became apparent that those revelatory experiences which had characterized my early love of literature were becoming ever more rare, like the fading of color from the world, the flavor sucked out of the sweet, the well running dry. At a certain point, for whatever reason, maybe age, maybe too many books, who can say, but at a certain moment I realized that I had to try just that much harder to find those moments of ecstasy which had once occurred so often. It was suddenly so much harder to find something that felt new, different, alive. The incredible Scottish modernist poet Hugh McDiarmid, over 100 years later, wrote a very beautiful poem, again about a rainbow. To my mind, the poem is in active conversation with Wordsworth's text. The great difference in subject is that while Wordsworth's rainbow completes its arc across the horizon, Hugh McDiarmid's subject, the water gore, doesn't cast a complete arc, but is rather the broken shaft of a rainbow. The poem is written in a language that MacDiarmid called synthetic Scots, forged to create a rich mode of expression for the enrichment of Scotland's national literature. We'll first hear the poem in Scots and then in MacDiarmid's translation.
A week for nicht of the outrummel, I saw yon entering thing, a water go with its shittering licht, ayont the yonding, and I thought of the last wild look you gied before you did. There was nae reek of the Laverick's hoose that night, and nae mine, but I hae thought of that foolish licht ever since syne, and I think that maybe at last I ken what your look need then. A water go is a broken rainbow, a broken shaft of a rainbow that you can see sometimes between clouds. Not a complete arc. And this poem says, one wet early evening, in the sheep shearing season, I saw that occasional or rare thing, a broken shaft of a rainbow with its trembling light beyond the downpour of the rain. And I thought of the last wild look you gave before you died. The next two lines are very difficult idiom. The skylark's nest was dark and desolate. My heart was too. But I have thought of that foolish light ever since then, and I think that perhaps at last I know what your look meant then.
Where Wordsworth had found in this natural phenomenon evidence for life's eternal gifting of the joyous revelatory experience, MacDiarmid finds an expression of death, and perhaps even evidence for life's broken promises. Wordsworth's rainbow, which had seemed to offer so much, which appeared to throw itself in one magnificent stable arc across the sky, is seen in the moment of death to be a fragile thing, its light trembling and foolish, its stability and continuity a lie, its brilliance shadowed by large patches of darkness. Between these two poets, the rainbow can teach us as much about sorrow and death as it can about joy and life. To make a somewhat trivial analogy, I've come to regard the reading experience as something like this. Despite what it appears to be at first with one's richest early experiences of reading, not every book is able to cast its luminescent arc across the horizon. There can be long periods of overcast shadow, and sometimes it may be many months, even years in between the sudden emergence of those extraordinary reading experiences, those literary rainbows. For me, there's a great sadness in this. At times I feel almost incapable of the intensity of those early reading experiences. But I do know, despite their rarity, that I'm never going to stop chasing them. By the way, this isn't where I live, unfortunately. I'm on holiday right now in Dolny Śląsk, or Lower Silesia, and it's an absolutely beautiful spot. Can't get enough of it. I was in Silesia for 4 days, and given the topic I'm discussing, I was hoping more than anything to see a rainbow. For a long time there was nothing, and I'd pretty much given up when, on the afternoon of the 4th day, in the hills around Przecieka, the sky unclenched, releasing a shower of rain. In the distance briefly shimmered that rainbow I'd been waiting for all along, a reminder not to lose hope. I hope I'm not alone in this feeling, so let me know in the comments if you had similar experiences in your reading life. And maybe most importantly, tell me which books really stood out above all the others and broke up those patches of darkness. If you like the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The support really means a lot to me. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.